What's going on, everyone? Scott here, and welcome back to the channel. So, Survivor Season 50, Episode 9 is here. Now, last week, we saw Devins finally pay off what we saw earlier in the season, him and Christian hiding that fake idol at Tribal Council. We saw that finally paid off with him pulling the idol shenanigans at Tribal Council to try to save himself for this vote and potentially that vote and this upcoming vote as well, causing a big commotion around that with the fake idol, and we ended up seeing Coach and Chrissy go home in the twist last week that you were voting for a pair of people to go home. So before we do jump into this episode, if you could just hit that like and subscribe button down there. We'll have more Survivor 50 content on the channel, so just make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. So back at camp, Jonathan is telling Devins that it didn't look good to get his ego boost finding this idol at Tribal, as Jonathan was saying in his confessional. Devins explaining his story to everyone kind of, individually, and he's like, in his confessional was like, that was the most chaotic tribal and fun tribal he's had this season. And he's like, I missed it. Devins tells Emily that I didn't tell any of y'all this because it's total bull. So he comes clean to someone there. I'm pretty sure him or now Emily and Christian are the only two that know that that's obviously, total bull in Devins' words. But it's kind of, I'm curious how many people actually believe this is a real thing, because I think Stephanie said this on Instagram in a comment or something somewhere that, Jeff has said, and he said publicly before, like, they would never hide something at Tribal Council. So, if people pay attention to those little things, which I'm sure everyone out there does, then, I doubt a lot of people will pay attention to that or take it seriously, but who knows? Emily is like, he put our entire alliance at risk because now people want him out and kind of draws attention to them. Put a pin in that, more on that later. But Joe, Jonathan, and Stephanie still together, but trying to figure out where to go with two people from their alliance now out. And, Stephanie says that she's ready to slit all of their throats. But the next day, day 17, so we are under 10 days left in this game. Absolutely crazy. But Ozzy and Rizzo talk about how stupid of a move it was for Devins, but fantastic for them because now all of the heat is off their idols. Now, this can obviously change on a dime in one episode or going into next week, like whatever the case may be. Like, their idols haven't really been talked about here in like a little bit. Like, it's been kind of a little bit of a discussion, but it hasn't been like, these two people have idols and we need to get them out. So they're kind of sliding under the radar. Obviously that alliance with Suri as well, and sliding under the radar to this point with both of their idols still intact. But Joe joins Ozzy and Suri to talk about how sloppy Devins' play was. Suri was like, I loved every second of it, Devins at Tribal Council, because he now has a bigger bullseye than her. And as she says, anyone that has a bigger bullseye than her is beneficial to her game. Suri has a good couple of groups, should I say, involved that she's working with, and she's working with pretty much everyone. We talked about her main group with Ozzy and Rizzo being that, but she is working relationships with pretty much every group and subgroup that you can think of that's left in this game. Jonathan and Joe trying to figure out where they can go forward. Aubrey tells Jonathan that she doesn't like that play by Devins and wants to distance herself from him, even though they're perceived as a pair because they played on the same season together. But she is willing to jump ship, and they have an agreement to tell each other if they hear something going forward. But Joe and Devins talk about why Joe was so mad last night about the move. And Joe said that he was never going to vote for him, and Devins is like, no, it seems like your guys' hands got stuck in the cookie jar. And Joe's like, no, but they end up hugging it out, but it doesn't really, feel weird. I don't feel like they're going to be on the same page going forward. We saw that earlier this season as well. I imagine that'll be the same going forward. Emily and Christian talk about how huge of a target Devins is now, and Christian talks about trying to maneuver that target, kind of somewhere else, outside of their alliance. But Christian wants to do damage control with Jonathan and Stephanie, and Christian tells them that he hasn't heard their name, but Jonathan is like, Christian is so untrustworthy, and to try to regain some trust, Jonathan says that he doesn't know how they can get there to work together, and Christian offers up his shot in the dark to smooth things over. We saw him do that earlier this season with Ozzy as well. Jonathan tells Joe that they can get Christian out easy because of Christian offering up his shot in the dark, and then they can try to flush Devins' idol too. Obviously, it's a fake idol, but trying to get that shot in the dark from Christian and then just immediately turn around and blindside him. But Christian joins Jonathan, Joe, and Stephanie for a chat on the beach, and it is very awkward. So Maybe Christian's mind about that, maybe starting to change, even though if you want to build that trust, but if things are getting that awkward in just these early conversations, might want to jump ship on that. But Christian is like, are they thinking about getting rid of me? Christian comes to the realization that he is perceived as the middle of this game right now, but he thinks that Ozzy is playing the middle the most and talking with everyone. He tells Devins and Suri about this. The only problem with that is Suri is like, why do people keep coming for my allies? And she's like, we've had a good working relationship, but can't let them take a shot at one of my number ones. They've had a good working relationship, but as Suri said, Christian's like number 3, so my number 3 would have to go before my number 1. But Suri tells Ozzy this, and he's like, I knew it was coming. And Ozzy isn't convinced that Christian isn't a robot walking around in human skin. Look, at the end of the day, we all love Christian, and he's incredible to be out there on Survivor. Suri tells Jonathan that Christian said it could be him or Ozzy tonight. So now Jonathan has even more reason to try to get Christian shot in the dark to help get him out. We head to the immunity challenge. Rice negotiation, kind of. Jeff's like, we can pull out the knife like he, has done it sometimes, or, go and negotiate it. But he said that idea doesn't work for this season, and people wanted the survivors to earn their rice. And he's like, getting people to sit out isn't really earning the rice. So he's competing in this challenge, and he says he will put the rice back on the line if 5 people make a side bet with him. And if he outlasts even just one of them, then he keeps the rice. But if all 5 of them that make this side bet with Jeff outlast Jeff, then the group gets the rice. And a little negotiation, not a whole lot. Jonathan just like, is this any move? Like, can we do 4? Is there any movable? Jeff's like, okay, well, who are the 4? Jonathan, Tiffany, Joe, and Ozzy all agreed to make the side bet. Jeff's like, I'll do it. Jeff says it's Jimmy Fallon's idea. Did the poll on a show and like 90% of people wanted Jeff to compete? I would want Jeff to compete too. I think this was awesome. I think this was one of the best moments of the season so far. Rizzo's first out and starts hosting a little bit. Emily and Devins join him right behind him. And Jeff is like a real news anchor in Devins, or a real broadcaster in Devins over here to host. And Rizzo starts talking, Emily does, Devins does, and we have a nice montage of Jeff trash talking throughout the years. Jeff's bucket does eventually drop, and he's like, I will never talk the same trash talk again until next season. But Joe ends up winning immunity, just barely beating out Ozzy in the end. Now Joe has to send one person on a journey. A couple of people offer to go, and he's like, all right, just do rock, paper, scissors to a championship and figure out who's going. Christian wins and is going. So Ozzy is obviously like, this is worst case scenario with wanting Christian out, who is trying to backstab him going on this journey. Now back at camp, they're trying to figure out how much rice to cook, and Emily's concerned with how much rice they're cooking, and Suri's like, listen, I've been cooking rice before you were a twinkle in your mom's eye. Like, please stop. Tiffany tells Devins, I'm going to keep it real with you, and I've heard your name, so if you've got an idol, you got to play it. Devin's like, oh yeah, I don't go home with idols, so even though he doesn't have an idol. But Jonathan tells Joe Christian is trying to push his name or Ozzy. Jonathan's trying to get Rizzo on board. Rizzo says that Christian is the most dangerous player here. Jonathan is doing his rounds, and most people are pretty receptive to getting Christian out. And obviously worried about this journey that he's on, if he could have an advantage or what the case may be. So, well, let's just jump to that that journey that Christian is on. In the middle of the ocean, recall Rachel from season 47, a similar type of challenge in the middle of the ocean, had to, complete that puzzle there. Different puzzle here, and it's a note there. It says, hey, it's Jimmy Fallon. And got to finish the puzzle in the time and earn a new advantage. Jimmy Fallon won in the urn advantage. You have to write a name of another player and put it in the urn, and they will start tribal council with 1 vote already in the urn. But if you fail, you have to take this envelope back to camp and read it in front of everyone. So no, trying to maneuver the story or put the story that you want out there. You have to read this note for whatever the obviously bad consequences are in front of everyone. He gets into the puzzle and he's going, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, these are moving pretty fast, and he's only got like some of the circle done, and it ends up falling into the ocean, so he does not complete the challenge. does not get the advantage, has to take the envelope back to camp to read whatever its consequences are. And we see a vulnerable moment from Christian, and he relays a message to his son. And he's like, "You're not defined by the moments you fall short. You're defined by what you do after." So he gets back up, goes back to camp, and see what this note has, and try to spin the wheel from there. Takes the note back to camp, and he reads the note in front of everyone. Says, "You will be the first player in history to cast a vote against yourself." Devins and Christian talk, and Christian is like, "Is it moving towards me?" Devin's like, "I think it might be." So they're trying to work something out there, and Christian knew, and he's also like my closest ally, and Devins is the other target. So this is all bad news bears coming up right now for Christian, unfortunately. But he says he can't, but since he can't vote, should I say, he can't play a shot in the dark. So he gives it to Jonathan just to try anything to try to swing the vote or trust somewhere to swing the thing back in his favor. But Emily tells Suri and Tiffany that we need to take a shot at Ozzy. Suri and Tiffany, like, no, like, Tiffany's like, she's being messy out here. They tell Ozzy this. So then the plan is moving to Emily. Emily is flip-flopping all over the place. I think it was Ozzy that said that, but they included Rizzo and Aubrey on this conversation, and Rizzo thinks it should be Christian. He tries to go talk to Joe to get on board to go after Christian. But short story, it's all over the place. An interesting note there that Rizzo wanting to do something different than what Suri and, Ozzy were doing. It's like, we'll see how the vote comes out, but it's like, just because you're in an alliance, you always want to vote together. But I think a vote like this, where it's going to be so close and it possibly could be split, I don't put much stock into that being a huge problem, but we'll get more on that once we see the votes here. We had this tribal council. They talk about how the rice kind of gave energy for everyone. It's like, all right, we're here to play. Christian explains his situation, and Suri afterwards is like, we can go with the easy route, or we can play Survivor. Suri says people are unpredictable. The moment you think you know what your closest ally or your adversary is going to do, you're probably out of this game and you're probably blindsided. But how long does it take for the relationships and alliances that you make to turn on each other? Because only one person wins this game in the end. That was a lot of the talk from Tribal Council, but we get to the votes. And unfortunately, Christian does go home. Ends up being 3 votes on Devins, 2 votes on Ozzy, and 6 votes on Christian there to get us to the final 10. So a tough vote out for Christian, and Devins, I think, did him in a little bit too with those shenanigans last week, which, I mean, Devins, in his defense a little bit, felt like he had to do that, but I think in a way with Christian kind of being looped into that group, he kind of got, like, oh, this target is getting bigger on Devins, so we have to get someone associated with Devins. And then Christian also was seen as someone who was playing in the middle, along with Devins and along with Emily as well. But, so they all, Christian had a big target on his back as well. It wasn't all just because of what Devins did. Christian had a big target on his back, Devins had a big target on his back as well, and Emily had a target on her back as well, too. So next week, we see Devins ready to blow up the game and team up with Emily to potentially do this, it looks like. Lots of names being thrown out. Rizzo, Devins, Aubrey, and then it looks like we get the Survivor auction and the Mr. Beast Super Beware Advantage. So that'll be an interesting one, but this one, kind of just a couple things to wrap this one up. So let's just kind of talk about the Rizzo, Ozzy, Suri alliance, and we saw them maybe differing in opinion on the way to go tonight. Ozzy did vote for Devins, but then Rizzo and Suri did vote for Christian. So voting separately, that was probably planned. I'm assuming that they just came to an agreement there, but going after Christian there, I think the reason for this, in my opinion, listen, after this, you now get down to 10 people in the game. And when you look at everything, Christian was kind of the consensus of a lot of people, clearly. Obviously, he got 6 of the votes, and it was like, okay, we want to throw a couple on Devins just in case. And then there was the 2 people that wanted to throw votes on Ozzy. But in my opinion, I don't know, obviously we don't know what their thinking was as of right now, but you get to 10 now without making a super move to kind of out you as an alliance. You get to 10, now at 10, okay, and like a little bit looking ahead, we know next week's going to be a 2-hour episode, so maybe 1, if not 2 people going home. We know there's only, a handful of episodes left. So we're kind of getting down to this thing, but just kind of trying to piece this together. It's like, all right, gameplay wise, you get to 10. Now let's say you make a move at 10. Now it's like a little bit smaller numbers. And if you have to remember, for that group, the three still have Cerise extra vote. You have Ozzy's idol. You have Rizzo's idol. Okay. So even just the two idols, like, in theory, if they're going for the whole group, like, yeah, that might get you through one tribal with all of them. But if you can play that out, and make a big move there at 10, okay, now you're at 9. Now, if one of them can win the necklace, then it's like, all right, you got two idols to potentially shield you, save you, get you to 8, and kind of anything can happen. Like, you see it, they kind of mentioned it in this tribal council. It's like the game kind of not resets completely, in my opinion, every day, but each day is kind of like a new day. Like, you can win immunity, you can find an idol, you can find an advantage, something can happen. Someone can make someone mad and want to change and vote them out. Like, everything goes. So I think this one was maybe not wanting to kind of reveal themselves, and that there was an underlying alliance of them three and kind of the different connections that they had, kind of not wanting to reveal themselves too early to set themselves up, in the next round and going forward. So that's kind of my opinion on that. And I, I think it's, I think that's fine right now. Obviously, hate to see Christian go home. Absolutely loved him out there. I thought he was playing a pretty solid game, made some mistakes, obviously, but some of them weren't even his mistakes. Maybe just, Christian or Emily spilling some of his secrets earlier in the game, some of Devin's shenanigans, which, is fine, can be good or bad if they work for you and people buy the shenanigans and are going for them, then yeah, it's really good. But if not, then, we kind of see the consequences of that as well. But absolutely love Christian out there. Happy to have him back on our screens this season. It's been obviously a while since we've had him on the screens, and, he was fantastic this season. So sad to see him go, but anyway, that'll do it for this one. As I said, we're kind of getting down to two things here. I think we have like what 5 episodes left, maybe. We're getting down to it. 4 or 5 episodes left. Handful of weeks. We're less than 10 days left in the game. 10 people left in the game. So it's getting real fast. So anyway, that'll do it for this one. We'll be back next week to recap next week's episode. But thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.